Study Section 13. Social Work Practice in Nigeria. Introduction. In this study section, we will examine how social work practice in Nigeria has evolved into an establishment of industry, the growth of towns, concentration of population, new trades, new customs, changes in the land tenure system, improved education, railways, better roads, improved communications, and thereby, of course, to a rising tide of social change far beyond local traditional approaches. We will also explore how social work practice is practiced using Nigeria as a case study. The practice has evolved so rapidly over time that generic approach to social work practice is fast being pushed into the background, while specialization in social work practice is taking the foreground. Learning outcomes. After you have studied this study section, you should be able to 1. Describe social work practice in Nigeria. 2. Highlight casework services in the early development of social work practice in Nigeria. 3. Point out the types of social work services that is practiced in Nigeria. History of social work practice in Nigeria. The Colony Welfare Service was started in 1945 during the closing stages of World War II. In common with many other countries affected by the war, many social problems were created, of which the most serious was the increase in the number of children absconding from their homes in Lagos and the interior of Nigeria, and were living on the street and developing delinquent habits. In the attempt to find a solution to this problem, a group of young Nigerians opened the Green Triangle Club. The objective was to arrest the increasing number of delinquent boys on the streets. These children came to the club to engage in different activities, and whilst there, they made friends with the adults, helpers, who tried to influence them to return to their homes and settle down. Many members of the public made financial contributions to help. Some of the children who had no homes in Lagos or whose parents did not want them to return home because of their delinquent ways began living at the club. Mr. D. Faulkner, who was working at the Enugu Boys Approved School, was in Lagos on his way to England on vacation. Together with the Green Triangle Club helpers, carried out a survey of juvenile delinquency and submitted the report to the government. The high incidence of juvenile delinquency and the inadequacy of the methods available for dealing with it were such that the report submitted to the government strongly recommended the setting up of a colony welfare services designed primarily to help delinquent boys. The Colony Welfare Service was eventually organized in 1942 and concentrated especially on the setting up of boys' club, which would help in preventing delinquency. Boys' Remand Home was opened at Military Street, Lagos. It housed delinquent boys. 3 men and 3 women were given scholarship for training in social science and administration in 1943 to work in the Colony Welfare Service on their return from overseas. At this time, the Salvation Army was responsible for running a boys' reformatory at Yaba, but juvenile delinquency was still on the increase. The reformatory was largely being financed by the government. The government therefore decided to close this down and to open a boys-approved school at Ishere as part of the Colony Welfare Service. In March 1945, a group of boys moved to Ishere. Within a few years, over 100 boys in the institution, now having permanent buildings, become good members of society. These boys were taught different trades. Salvation Army vacated their Yaba premises, and government used this as home for delinquent girls and small boys. Such children included those who had got lost in Lagos or who had been sent to work as house servants and, having been ill-treated, had run away. Moreover, as a result of the war, again there was a marked increase in child prostitution, and women social welfare officers were appointed to rescue young girls from brothels. The girls thus rescued remained at the girls' home until they could be taken back to their homes. Furthermore, the number of the runaway delinquent girls was increased by the girls who objected to their being married to soldiers who were back from the World War II. The social welfare officers also took care of them. As the services developed, more delinquent girls became known to the social welfare officers, and those who were uncontrollable were put in boarding schools, which were run by missionary bodies. In 1956, an approved school was opened for delinquent girls. The services also began foster homes for boys and girls whose delinquency resulted from lack of parental care. Many foster parents rendered invaluable assistance in the training of children. For many years, the service worked under the Native Children Custody and Reformation Ordinance, which provided for the cases of children brought before the court for criminal charges. However, the services made no provision for children in need of care and protection or those that were beyond their parental control. In 1948, the Juvenile Court was established. It was then discovered that many boys started stealing and absconding from home at a very early stage. Junior Boys Approved School, called Burrell's House, was opened to provide training for such boys from the age of 8 to 11 years. There was no native authority court in Lagos where matrimonial cases of marriages under the native law and custom could be heard, and therefore social welfare officers were set aside to deal with these matters. In many cases, married couples came to refund dowries. However, in some cases, couples who were desirous of reconciliation were reconciled by the social welfare officers. From such a beginning, a family welfare service was started. As implied above, it was designed primarily to effect reconciliation between husbands and wives, and became very popular in Lagos. Many couples did not like to take their matrimonial troubles to the elders of their various families for fear of being biased. They therefore embraced family welfare service. Also, family welfare service cared for the children of the broken marriage. Social welfare officers discussed that it was customary for men to try to punish their wives when the marriage collapsed. They did this by taking away the children or failing to help in the maintenance of the children. Fathers who behaved thus and who would not maintain their children were voluntarily brought before the juvenile court, and the presiding magistrate would make orders for the fathers to contribute monthly sum towards the maintenance of their children. While still in the care of their mothers, social welfare officers enforced this order by making sure that the fathers paid and mothers cared for the children. Over the years, the scope of family welfare service has widened, and it now deals with varied family matters, including paternity disputes, apart from the boys' clubs and the girls' clubs founded. Women's clubs, sports, community centers were also built, and urban development was undertaken. Casework services in Nigeria. The unit under Social Welfare Division since 1968 consists of the following: Juvenile Welfare Unit, Yaba; Juvenile Court; Aftercare Services, Lagos; Family Welfare Unit, Lagos; Children's Unit, Lagos; Adult Probation; Adoption Unit; Juvenile Welfare Unit, Ikeja; Family Welfare Unit, Ikeja; Aftercare Services, Ikeja; and Social Welfare Division, Takwa Bay Camp. There are also social welfare institutions such as Mapara Senior Boys Approved School, Isheri; Isheri Intermediate Boys Approved School, Isheri; Burrell House Junior Boys Approved School, Yaba; Girls Approved School, Idiaraba; Boys Remand Home, Yaba; Girls Remand Home, Idiaraba; and Children's Remand Home, Oshodi. Mr. D. Faulkner was the first head of Social Welfare Department. Ms. Allison Isaacs took over from him when he retired. Then Mrs. W. A. Markwen, who took over as head in 1960. Types of social work services and entry guidelines for social workers. Social workers play different roles in various agencies where they are engaged. In other words, the agency determines its own functions. Social workers employed to work in these agencies must comply with all the functions of the agency. However, such social workers must be trained in line with the need of the agency. Agency functions and the social workers' areas of training must correlate. Some of these services in social work practice in Nigeria are discussed below. Probation service. This is a modern approach to the treatment of young offenders. It aims not just to punish the offender, but to correct, to reform, to reorientate, and to rehabilitate, and restore him to the status of a respectful and conforming citizen. This is a great shift from emphasis on making the punishment fit the offense. Social workers in probation service are called probation officers. They work among men, women, and children who have legal cases in court. They serve as social welfare officers to them and liaise between the court and the offenders. The juvenile court uses non-institutional treatment, which includes probation, repatriation, fines, committal to fit person, batching, and binding over. Probation is keeping the offender, though at liberty, under the close watch of a social welfare officer for a period of time to effect a positive change in the life of the offender. The Juvenile Court. The Juvenile Court Law was first enacted in Lagos in 1943 to cope with the welfare of the children and young offenders. Juvenile Court was officially established in Lagos in 1948 when trained Nigerian probation officers returned from overseas to serve the courts. Juvenile court is not open. It is restricted only to those members of the public who are directly concerned with the cases before the court. Only cases involving juveniles who are below the age of 17 are brought to the court. A child under the Children and Young Persons Act of 1963, revised 1978, Lagos State is a person under the age of 14 years, and a young person means a person who has attained the age of 14 years and is under the age of 17 years. A wide variety of offenses involving juveniles are brought before the juvenile court. These include cases of stealing and attempted stealing, assault, fighting, and hawking. Children and young persons beyond parental control or in need of care and protection also appear before the court. Also, cases of abandoned children, of children deprived of adequate care by their parents or guardians, and of those exposed to moral danger because of company they keep or their environments. The sole preoccupation of the juvenile court is the protection of the welfare of these young ones. Recommendation made by the probation officer to the court is usually taken by the magistrate. The remand home. The remand homes serve as places of detention for juvenile offenders while awaiting trial, and as places of shelter for juveniles in need of care and protection. It is also a center for skilled observation of the juvenile. Social workers in remand homes are called institutional workers, and they try to find out useful facts about the children. The children are interviewed by the social workers. They are observed at work and at play to ascertain their personality make-ups, facts about the child's social background, family situation of the offender, his relationship to his family, his health, and school reports are investigated and recorded. All the field reports are presented at the juvenile court to assist in its decision on the expedient type of treatment for each of the juveniles. The time spent in remand home varies from one child to another. It depends on how long it takes the social workers, caseworker, to obtain all the necessary list of information. The approved school. In spite of the fact that there is a gradual shift of emphasis from institutional to non-institutional care of delinquents, approved school training for young offender is still an integral part of our penal policy. It provides above all the corrective training essential to making a reality of the goal to reform the young offenders. The juvenile offenders deserve a special treatment because the younger an offender is, the more hope there is for his reformation and better prospect for the future. He, unlike the adult offender, easily feels sorrowful for his offenses. He may be a creature of his surroundings, which may be difficult, unhappy home or bad company. The goal of the approved institution, therefore, is to reform the offender and make him a useful and contented member of the society. There are different levels of approved schools for juveniles under the age of 17. Junior approved school is 8 to 12 years. Intermediate is 12 to 15 years. And senior is 15 to 17 years. Aftercare service. The service provided by the aftercare section of the Social Welfare Division is an essential ingredient for an effective rehabilitation and reintegration of young offenders who are committed to approved institutions in the society. Aftercare officers, that is social workers, are not officers of the court, but have duties to perform for the court by making sure that parents who have children in approved schools remit money regularly. Aftercare service is available for two main categories of juveniles. A. Offenders released on license before the expiration of the corrective orders. Aftercare workers will supervise the juvenile until his corrective order has expired. B. Ex-approved schools boys and girls were released after the expiration of the corrective orders. The service given them is voluntary. It usually lasts for a year from the date of their discharge. 1. Medical or psychiatric social workers. These social workers function in health or hospital setting and are concerned with psychosocial aspects of the patient's illness. 2. Family case workers. They work with the families for the total well-being of the families. They are found in social welfare offices. Child care officers. They work with children deprived of a normal home life for whatever reason. They enforce legislation for the protection of children, and they work with adoptions and other children in need of care, protection, and control. Entry in social work practice. In building up a relationship with the client, some steps must be followed. These steps are using the gather approach. G. Greet the clients politely and warmly. A. Ask the client about himself or herself and family. T. Tell the client about services available to her or him. H. Help the client make a decision that is best for her or him. E. Explain the method or treatment and other relevant issues to the client. R. Return. Visit schedule. Pay a return visit to the client. Study section summary. In this study section, we examine the historical background of social work practice in hygiene. Specifically, we mention the closing stages of World War II as the period when the practice started gaining ground in Nigeria. We also gave the list of some casework services which have developed under Social Welfare Division since 1968. We also noted that social work practice has developed into a full profession with many areas of specialization. However, it is the function of social work practice to ensure the following: to find homes for parentless children, to treat those with emotional difficulties, to make life more meaningful for the elderly, to provide vocational and rehabilitation services to persons with physical and mental disability, to meet financial needs of the poor, to rehabilitate juveniles and adults who have committed criminal offenses, to provide childcare services for parents who work outside the home, to counteract violence in families, including child abuse and spouse abuse, to fulfill the health and legal exigencies of those in financial need, and to counsel individuals and groups experiencing a wide variety of personal and social difficulties. End of study section 13 and end of SO 101. Thanks for listening.